Hello, I'm not showing my face because I would prefer to stay alive. I'm Russian, I grew up there. I lived most of my life inside that system, and what I want to talk about is not propaganda, not ideology, not moral judgment. It's something more basic and more uncomfortable. You were lied to about Putin, but not in the way people usually mean when they say that. You already know Russian state media lies. You already know about censorship, repression, manipulation. That part is obvious. The lie I'm talking about is subtler and much more dangerous. It's the assumption that Putin operates within the same psychological and political framework as Western leaders, just with worse values. That assumption shapes everything. How people talk about negotiations, sanctions, peace, escalation, endings, and it's wrong. In the West, politics is built around outcomes. Even when systems are corrupt or dysfunctional, there is an underlying belief that leaders are trying to reach some kind of goal. Economic growth, security, stability, re-election, historical legacy. There is always an imagined end point, even if it's never fully achieved. That belief is so deep that people don't even notice it. It's just how power is supposed to work. In Russia, power is not a tool to achieve outcomes. Power is the outcome itself. This isn't philosophy, it's not even cynicism, it's structural reality. Power is something you hold, protect, extend, and defend against time. You don't use it to build a better future and then step aside. You hold it because stepping aside is dangerous. Once you understand that, many things that seem irrational suddenly make sense. When I still lived in Russia, people didn't discuss politics the way Westerners do. There was no language of policy debates or long-term visions. Nobody asked what the country would look like in 10 or 20 years. That kind of thinking felt almost childish. Politics was treated like weather or gravity. It was there, it shaped everything, and you adjusted your life around it. Real conversations didn't happen on television or in public spaces. They happened in kitchens, late at night, often after a few drinks, with the TV still on in the background. Not because anyone was watching, but because silence felt more dangerous than noise. And even in those conversations, people didn't ask, what does Putin want for Russia? That question itself felt strange, like asking what a storm wants from the city it floods. The questions were different. How long will this last? Will it get worse? What happens after him? And almost always the conversation would trail off, because the honest answers were either unknown or unbearable. Western media often portrays Putin as someone driven by ideology, Soviet nostalgia, nationalism, imperial ambition. These things exist, but they're not the engine. They are decorations, tools. Ideology in Russia is not something leaders believe deeply. It's something they use to organize reality for others. It provides language, symbolism, emotional cues. It does not define limits. Putin does not want the Soviet Union back in the way people imagine it. He doesn't want communism. He doesn't want collective purpose. He doesn't want equality. He wants the shape of that power, vertical, unquestionable, and permanent. The Soviet Union matters not because it was good, but because it lasted. It proves that a closed system of power can survive for generations, even while people suffer inside it. That's the lesson, not the ideology. One of the most persistent Western misunderstandings is the idea that Putin must care deeply about Russia's prosperity, because why else would he rule it? This is democratic logic projected outward. In democracies, leaders are punished for failure. They are voted out. Their reputations collapse. Their parties fracture. Prosperity matters because legitimacy depends on it. In systems like Russia's, leaders are punished for weakness. Prosperity is optional. Stability is optional. Approval is optional. Control is not. From the inside, this is something people understand intuitively. They may not articulate it, but they feel it. The system is not designed to make life better. It is designed to make life predictable in a way that protects the center. Better lives are a bonus, not a requirement. This is why war plays such a different role than Western observers expect. In the West, war is seen as a catastrophe, a rupture, an emergency that must be resolved. It is something abnormal that demands an end. In Russia, prolonged conflict serves a structural function. It absorbs attention. It explains economic decline. It justifies repression. It reframes every personal hardship as part of collective struggle. Most importantly, war freezes time. Peace creates a future, war suspends it. A frozen conflict means no reckoning, no accounting, no transition. It keeps the system in a permanent present where responsibility can always be deferred. And for a regime built on permanence, that is not a failure of strategy, it is a success. People often ask why sanctions don't work the way they expect. The assumption is that enough economic pressure will create mass dissatisfaction, which will turn into political pressure. That assumption is rooted in societies where people believe dissatisfaction can be converted into change. Russia is not one of those societies. Russians are not unfamiliar with hardship, they are unfamiliar with agency. For decades, sometimes generations, people have learned that political outcomes are not influenced by personal action. When things get worse, the instinct is not rebellion, it's adjustment. You find workarounds, you lower expectations, you stop planning long term, you focus on survival, family, small pleasures. You learn which rules matter and which ones exist only on paper. That's not this, it's conditioning. Western discussions often swing between two comforting extremes. Russians are either brainwashed supporters of the regime or secretly rebellious victims waiting for the right moment to rise up. Both narratives preserve moral clarity. Reality is much messier and far less dramatic. Most people are tired, most people are cautious, most people live in a constant state of low-level psychological compression, where saying the wrong thing at the wrong time carries consequences that are vague but real. You don't need prisons full of dissidents to maintain control. You just need uncertainty. Uncertainty does the work for you. This is where propaganda is deeply misunderstood. In Russia, propaganda is not primarily about convincing people of lies. It's about shaping the emotional atmosphere. Confusion works better than belief. Cynicism works better than enthusiasm. If people don't trust anything fully, they won't risk anything seriously. I remember watching state news with relatives. They would openly mock it, laugh at the absurd claims, make sarcastic comments about the presenters, and then, later in casual conversation, repeat the same framing almost word for word, not because they believed it, because it was familiar. Propaganda doesn't need conviction, it needs presence. Like background noise, it becomes part of how reality is organized. This brings us to the idea of negotiations, which is where Western logic really breaks down. Diplomacy assumes that everyone wants something they don't yet have. Security guarantees, economic access, international recognition, normalization, return to stability. But what if someone already has the only thing they truly care about? Unchecked power with no exit. In systems like Russia's, stepping down is not retirement, it's exposure, it's vulnerability, it's the possibility of accountability, and accountability is existentially dangerous. So when people ask, why doesn't he just stop, why not settle, they're missing the most important part. Stopping is not neutral, stopping is losing. From the inside, Russian lives have never been the highest value currency of the state. This sounds harsh, but it's historically consistent. Individuals are replaceable. Suffering is abstract. What matters is the continuity of the structure. This doesn't mean people are heartless. It means the system was never built around human flourishing. It was built around endurance. Endurance doesn't require happiness, it requires habit. When I moved abroad, one of the strangest cultural shocks was realizing how deeply Western societies expect closure. People expect endings, lessons, accountability, and moral resolution. They expect history to move forward in chapters. Russia doesn't work like that. It accumulates. Problems are layered, not solved. Crises don't end, they harden. This is why people waiting for a turning point keep getting disappointed. The system is not designed to turn, it is designed to persist. This also explains why comparisons to Western dictators often fail. People imagine sudden collapses, coups, revolutions, dramatic shifts. Those things happen, but they're not the default. Putin is not improvising, he is maintaining. Every decision is filtered through one question, thus this preserves the position and avoid transition. When you view events through that lens, the pattern becomes clear. So no, you weren't lied to because you think Putin is cruel or authoritarian. You were lied to because you think he wants an outcome that can be negotiated. He doesn't want peace, he doesn't want victory in the way you imagine it, he doesn't even need success. He wants position, duration, irreversibility. As long as those remain intact, everything else is secondary, borders, economies, even lives. I'm not saying this to remove hope or to preach despair. I'm saying it because misunderstanding the logic of power leads to endless surprise, frustration and bad strategy. If you want to understand Russia, stop asking what it wants, ask what it needs to never change. Once you do that, the behavior stops looking irrational, it starts looking consistent. I'm not trying to convince you of anything, I'm just telling you how it really looks from the inside. That's all. Thank you for watching.